Good evening and thank you for joining us. For the fourth consecutive year, the City of Thunder Bay has recorded a budget surplus. The city collected $3.4 million more in taxes than it spent in 2018.
Last night, Council voted to move that money into reserve funds. This, despite some councillors suggesting that residents should get at least some of that money back in the form of a tax reduction. Also last night, Council approved a 2019 tax policy that includes some short-term pain for homeowners, but is good news for apartment dwellers and the business sector. Ryan Benazzo has more.
The city collected more taxes than were spent in 2018. A $3.4 million surplus will now be funneled into reserves, the bulk of which, $2.5 million, will go into Renew Thunder Bay, which is used in part to leverage provincial and federal funding for major infrastructure projects. The city has recorded a surplus in each of the last 4 years, totaling more than $12 million. At-large Councillor Trevor Gertuga argued some of that should go back to residents in the form of a tax break.
If you tell someone you need this much money to build something for them, and you do it for under, the people should get the money back.
But most felt it more prudent to put that money away, citing uncertainty surrounding future funding from upper levels of government.
We have some very unstable times ahead of us right now, where funding opportunities are unclear and revenue streams are unclear.
It's like running your own home. You should have some money in the bank in case something happens, the roof leaks or something goes wrong. Always be ready for a rainy day.
This on the same night that Council selected a 2019 tax policy from 3 presented options, setting the tax ratios for each property class. Homeowners will see a 2.45% increase, which translates to about an extra $85. But some apartment dwellers will see their rent go down.
Approximately 17% of those tenants would be receiving tax-related rent reductions.
The new tax policy will also lower taxes for commercial and industrial property owners, which the city has been mandated to do by the province. Currently, those businesses, along with apartment renters, are exempt from shouldering an equal share of the year-over-year tax levy increases, as it's been deemed that their taxes are already disproportionately high. So while there's some additional short-term pain for homeowners, Cannon insists lowering taxes for businesses should pay off in the long run.
It promotes economic growth. In the long term, if we can attract businesses to Thunder Bay, it will lower the tax burden for existing taxpayers.
All those in favor?
The recommended tax policy passed, with councillors Trevor Gertuga, Cody Fraser, and Andrew Folds as the dissenting votes against the approved option. Ryan Benazzo, TBT News.
Next item, please.
Meanwhile, City Council has voted to amend the zoning bylaw to allow a new 253-unit self-storage facility at Northwood Park Plaza. The 2,900 square meter development will be located at the north end of the mall at the former Zellers location, which has sat vacant for at least the last decade. The president of the company that's owned the property for the past 7 years appeared before council last night. Michael Klein says the group has worked tirelessly to try and find another tenant before deciding to get into the self-storage business. Neighbors have expressed a few concerns, including the possibility that renters will store illegal items or substances inside the unit. That prompted Westford Councillor Kristen Oliver to ask about proposed security measures.
I'm assuming people would have a code to get in and out. So is there security measures in place to make sure that that the units are being used appropriately?
We're going to spend approximately $100,000 in camera and video equipment. There will be a full person during regular business hours, always in the office at the front of the facility, controlling access during business hours. We do not believe there will be off-hours access to the facility.
Over the years, Councillor Aldo Roberto also expressed a desire to see some additional landscaping improvements or perhaps even an outdoor mural to improve the exterior look of the building. The applicant agreed and must now submit a written commitment to that effect.
Now, this is a cold case many in Thunder Bay will remember. The discovery of the remains of a newborn baby boy wrapped in a garbage bag and abandoned by a retaining wall at Boulevard Lake. The body was found in March of 1994, and despite numerous efforts to solve the mystery over the years, investigators have made little headway. But it appears there has finally been a break in the Baby Doe case. Thunder Bay Police announced today that they'll be holding a news conference following what they're calling a significant development. That news conference will be held on Thursday.
A robbery at a Thunder Bay liquor store yesterday afternoon led to one man being arrested and a security guard suffering minor injuries. City police were dispatched just before 2:30 to the LCBO on Dawson Road after a report of a man and a woman attempting to take a bottle of liquor without paying. According to police, the security guard confronted the pair, which resulted in a struggle with the 32-year-old man. During the altercation, they broke through a window, which left the security guard with cuts on his neck and jaw. Despite those injuries, the guard held on to the man with help from a passerby, and police officers arrived to take the accused into custody. The suspect was charged with robbery. He appeared in court this morning.
People driving through Nipigon tomorrow afternoon could see some traffic delays due to a protest being held on the Nipigon River Bridge. Several area First Nations and municipalities are upset about the province's caribou recovery strategy, which they say will hamper the development in this region. The demonstration starts at noon and will last for about 2 hours. Traffic on the bridge will be reduced to one lane of slow-moving traffic in each direction. We'll have the full story about the protest on tomorrow's NewsHour.
The Northern Ontario Policy Institute says it's seeing a positive trend when it comes to income disparity between the Indigenous and non-Indigenous populations in Northern Ontario. In 2015, the average after-tax income for Indigenous people in Thunder Bay was about $28,500, or $9,000 less than the average non-Indigenous person. That gap was much larger for Indigenous men, who took home 70% of what a non-Indigenous man did, while Indigenous women after-tax income was 83% of what non-Indigenous women made. The president of the Northern Policy Institute, Charles Sirtwell, says the income gap is getting smaller. He says education and job opportunities have never looked better for Indigenous people as governments invest in clean water and access to training opportunities. Sirtwell says closing the gap will be a long process, but he believes that it can be done one victory at a time.
You look at the graduating class from, say, Dennis Franklin, and that's the win. Those 15 kids this year, those 18 kids last year, the 22, that's the win. And so we have to understand that it's going to take longer than any of us would like to take, and continue to invest in the things that are working.
Sirtwell says a new study based on the 2016 census will be released next week, and he's optimistic we'll see the income gap close even more, slowly but surely.
It was once one of the most popular attractions in the city of Toronto, but now the provincial government is looking at a massive redevelopment of Ontario Place. The government issued a call today for proposals from the private sector. Colin DeMello has details.
What was once considered the crown jewel of Ontario's waterfront now needs to be shined up. That's how the Ford government sees the iconic provincial landmark that has fallen into disrepair.
The Premier was very clear when he first came out that he wants this to be the biggest, boldest, most spectacular site that we can build.
This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create something remarkable.
The government announced today it is looking for international ideas to redesign Ontario Place. The Budweiser stage would be protected, as would Park Space. What could be gone, however, is the iconic Cinesphere.
From the standpoint of the construction that exists on Ontario Place, we've not put any restrictions. We've left it so that all options are on the table. And we're looking forward to see what proposals come forward, whether it's included, it's not included. That's something we're waiting to see what the private sector sees as a vision in terms of the proposals that they bring forward.
The government says there would be no investment from the province of Ontario. All of it would have to be built by the private sector. So what exactly is the Ford government hoping to see?
Exciting sport and entertainment landmarks, public spaces and parks, recreational facilities, and retail.
And after much concern over a casino, the government made it official today.
Our vision will not have casinos or condos included as part of the Ontario Place site.
While they're hoping to have proposals in place this September, there's no timeline for when the new Ontario Place would be built.
Colin DeMello, CTV News.
After 4 decades of silence, the Chippewa Park Carousel's original band organ is now playing its music loud and clear once again. The old organ hasn't been heard since the 1970s, but now, as part of the Carousel Restoration Project, it's fully restored and ready to be placed back on the carousel where it belongs. The restoration cost about $20,000, with half the bill being covered by Joan Miller and her family. The organ now features a new motor, drums, even a system that allows music to be played electronically. The only piece left is the facade, which is expected to be restored this fall. A special outdoor concert will be held at Waverly Park this Sunday afternoon before it's mounted back amongst the famous Chippewa horses.
Just to be able to take something that's just been sitting inside a workshop, out of use, and into the public eye for the first time in almost half a century is just a really amazing feeling. That the carousel can once again be accompanied by the music that it did when it started out.
The music behind me was part of my growing up. Songs from the war eras in particular that played on the organ. I still remember most of them. So it's going to be really neat to see this fully operational.
Angus says phase one of the carousel restoration has cost about $350,000 to $400,000 so far, and the project is now about halfway complete.
An animal rights activist is passing through the Thunder Bay area this week on his push scooter, trying to raise awareness about animal cruelty. Rich Adams, who goes by the name Rich the Vegan, began his cross-Canada trek April 1st in Halifax. He says he can cover over 100 kilometers on a good day, although poor weather slowed him down through Quebec and Eastern Ontario. Along the way, he is starting conversations around the topics of veganism and animal welfare. Adams was inspired to take the journey after witnessing the dog meat trade while living in South Korea.
It was then that it made me reflect upon myself. And I looked at myself and I said, I think I'm compassionate. I'm very compassionate to dogs, but I need to be true and I need to spread that compassion to all living beings. And that started me on my journey to become vegan and to live with true compassion.
Adams hopes his trip will inspire others to reflect and take action, including by making vegan choices.
Thunder Bay's contestant on MasterChef Canada finally hung up her apron in last night's episode after making it to the top 4. Chrissy Larocque says, despite being eliminated, she's never felt more ready to get back into the kitchen and put her culinary skills to work here in the city. Carmen Wong has her story.
The outpour of love and support from people across Canada, but especially from my hometown, Thunder Bay, it's just been absolutely amazing.
The former airline agent, who is now a chef at Daytona's restaurant, competed alongside 17 other home cooks from across the country, vying for the top prize of $100,000 and the bragging rights to a MasterChef Canada victory. It was her third time attempting to appear on the show, and this time around, she finally got her chance in season 6. She says it's been a life-changing experience overall.
This has proven to me that this is what I meant to do. The last thing that actually Chef Claudio said to me when we said goodbye was, I better find you in a professional kitchen. And I actually messaged him as soon as I got hired here. He messaged me back right away to say, good, I knew this is what you needed to do.
Larocque made it to the final 4 and was left to go head-to-head with Josh in what she says was the most intricate challenge, replicating a perfectly tempered chocolate sphere, which melts away to reveal a pistachio cake. And she says her fibromyalgia didn't help. Despite her pain in her neck and numbness in her arms, she pushed through, but failed to replicate the dessert.
No matter what we threw at you, you delivered. The kitchen is clearly where you belong, and we can't wait to see what you'll do next.
Although having to leave the show, she says she's proud of making it to the top 4. She says the greatest surprise about this whole experience was how quickly she bonded with all the other contestants.
You're competing with them, yes, but you become this family. And I found myself always rooting for the others, even when I was fighting against them in a challenge.
And as to who wins this season, Larocque says she knows the outcome of the show, but you won't hear it from her. With 3 cooks remaining in the competition, MasterChef Canada returns to its irregular Monday time slot, with the season 6 finale airing on June 10th at 7 p.m. on CTV. Carmen Wong, TVT News.
Magnus Theatre's newest collective creation project is hitting the main stage tonight. Good Time Charlie is written and performed by local high school students and shares an important message of consent.
You're not saying no, so I know that you want some. Hey, only a yes is a yes, and I'm saying no.
The play was produced by 8 students from Superior Collegiate and Hammersholt High School. The story revolves around the theme of consent and tries to educate the audience about what that means in an attempt to reduce sexual violence. The students have been spending 4 to 6 hours every week since November writing the play and rehearsing it twice a week before they take to the big stage. Brooke Malone, who plays Marco, says consent is just not talked about enough.
It's often not talked about through peers. It's not talked about sometimes between parents and children, and it's not taught in the curriculum as much as it should be. So it's a really great project and a really great medium to use to share that message.
When people hear that, they usually think it means just sexual consent, and we do touch on that, but there's all sorts of consent in this, just like there is in life. So consent to borrow something from someone, consent to give hugs, consent to take photos and share it online.
The Collective Creation Project was created 4 years ago and is an annual program that gives students an outlet to talk about issues that are important to them. Good Time Charlie will run tonight, tomorrow, and Thursday night at Magnus Theatre.
And it was a good time to be outside today, Fiona, and what a night it would be for a ball game.